The crimson dust swirled around Agnes, stinging her eyes. Thick with the acrid smell of burning wood and fear choked her lungs. She clutched her daughter, Imana's whimpers lost in the cacophony of the day. And the Rwanda she knew, the Rwanda of vibrant markets and warm smiles. This was a Rwanda consumed by a ravenous beast. The radio, crackling with static and hateful pronouncements, was their only window into this nightmare. Each broadcast was a hammer blow, driving deeper the wedges of distrust and violence. Hutu extremists, their faces contorted with fury, portrayed Tutsi as enemies, as vermin to be exterminated. Agnes, a Hutu, felt the insidious poison seeping into her heart, poisoning her perceptions, blurring the lines of friend and foe. But she also knew the truth. She knew the Tutsi families who lived next door, who shared laughter and meals. She remembered the joyous celebrations of her daughter's first steps, the stories whispered in the warmth of shared meals. These memories were now precious relics, fragile against the rising tide of hatred. The neighbors' once friendly faces were now shadows, their eyes reflecting a cold, calculating cruelty. The whispers turned to shouts, the shouts to gunfire. The familiar rhythm of daily life was shattered. The schoolyard where Imana had learned to read was now a battleground. The church, a sanctuary for years, was filled with blood. Agnes watched as the men of the village, her neighbors, her friends turned against each other, driven by the insidious propaganda. Fear became the prevailing emotion. The whispers became threats. Then came the violence. Homes were burned, families were torn apart. The cries of terror echoed through the valley. Agnes and Imana, trapped in their home, sought refuge in the shadows. The air itself felt heavy with impending doom. She saw the fear in Imana's eyes, the slow descent into terror. The world outside was fracturing, and so was the world inside her. Doubt gnawed at her, challenging her understanding of the world she knew. One night, a group of Tutsi women, huddled together, sought sanctuary at her home. Their fear was palpable, their stories whispered in hushed tones. Agnes, torn between the hate she was being fed and the humanity she knew deep within her heart, opened her home. In that dark, shared space, a fragile connection was forged. Agnes found herself facing the brutal truth of the propaganda she had blindly accepted. The brutal truth reflected in the horrified eyes of these women. She saw the humanity hidden behind the labels. She saw her neighbors, her fellow villagers, in a new light. This act of defiance, this shared vulnerability became her first step towards the impossible task of rebuilding. Days turned into weeks. The violence didn't cease. Agnes, with the courage born of desperation and a flickering hope, began to navigate the treacherous landscape of survival. Their small community, shattered by violence, struggled for a sliver of peace amidst the chaos. She saw the dead, smelled the death, and still she held on to hope. Years later, Rwanda struggled to heal. The scars ran deep, both physical and emotional. Agnes, now a woman shaped by unimaginable tragedy, looked out at the landscape, a landscape forever etched with the crimson of the past. She held Imana's hand, her gaze fixed on a future she was determined to build, a future that would never again be marred by such hate. Imana, though scarred, held hope in her eyes. Agnes knew that even in the darkest hour, the light of humanity could emerge. The echoes of the past might still haunt, but the whispers of a new dawn were growing louder. The genocide had shattered Rwanda, but it had not extinguished its spirit.